Let's move on to the layout tour. And today we have Jame Paul, a lifelong resident of Black Diamond and Covington, here just outside on the east side of Seattle. And he's been a longtime fan of the Northern Pacific in the late 60s and the BN just post-merger. So he's building a layout that features the Auburn yard and the line up to Stampede Pass. So he's going to give us a tour today of where he is in the construction of that layout.
All right. Well, thanks for taking some time today. Just want to provide an overview of my layout I'm working on. Kind of post-merger Burlington Northern era down here in the Black Diamond and Covington area. I'm kind of calling this Stampede Pass lines for lack of a better name. Just want to walk through some of the layout, design, and construction. We'll follow an eastbound freight across the layout. And then I wanted to kind of walk through a few design challenges and how I worked through them, explain what I was doing. And then a little Q&A. Just a little fact sheet. So prototype roads, Burlington Northern and pre-merger roads originally started, the first layout I'm going to show you was late 60s Northern Pacific. This time kind of moved it forward a little bit and into that post-merger era. Location, it's focused on Auburn. North to south, I'm modeling from Auburn down to about Meeker Junction. And then west to east is Auburn up through Stampede Tunnel. So north and south, so Seattle and Tacoma, and also Pasco are represented by staging. Got a multi-deck design. So the staging is the lowest at 32 inches. The main deck is at 40, and then the upper is anywhere from 52 to 62 inches. Using NCE as the DCC system, and radius, I've tried to keep the upper 20s in most areas. There's a couple of exceptions where, we all have to make design concessions, right? Little modeling history. Had an interest at an early age. This is a very 70s picture with the train set on the table. What you're going to see today is really my second attempt at building a real model railroad. I had the typical 4x8 layouts as a kid, but when we moved back to the house I grew up in, actually in 2001, I was like, hey, there's now space for a real layout, so we gave it a shot. So this was kind of the first attempt at building a real layout. Built it in a bay in the shop I have. I didn't really start with a detailed plan. Just knew I wanted something multi-deck and started building. And over time, just too many design problems. I guess that's one of the learnings through kind of doing model railroading is if I'm not enjoying working on something, there's a reason, and need to listen to that voice. So the other challenge here with this room was the only heat was this wood stove in the room, and by the time I got it warm out there, I ran out of time to work on the layout. So ended up dismantling this probably 2015, 2016 timeframe, and then I moved upstairs. There's a finished room upstairs. It's smaller in size, narrower too. The room size is about 11 and a half feet by 35 feet long. It's a little too narrow for kind of multiple aisles. So I was going to talk through some of the design challenges there. Started in about 2017, really didn't make any progress until COVID hit 2020. I had just started a relatively new job at the time, and suddenly had 3 extra hours in my day where I wasn't commuting from essentially Black Diamond to Capitol Hill. So, and for this layout, it salvaged nearly everything from the first layout. The lumber, the track, all the hidden track on the new layout is the code 100 that I used on the first layout. Using that for all the hidden areas. Anything that's visible is code 83. But this room had a couple of advantages. Natural light. It was nice to have that light, and I've got a different heating system up here, which was a lot faster than the wood stove. So bench work, I had an original goal of having this really nice modular bench work that I could manufacture downstairs and bring up pieces, but it ended up being a mixed bag of construction techniques. Since it's multi-level, I'm using a lot of these metal brackets for holding the upper deck, and then in some areas I have to cantilever those so that they're nice and rigid. And then there's one section of L girder. The middle of the room is just kind of one big L girder. Ended up building most of the bench work in the summer of 2020 with all that newfound time I wasn't commuting. Scenery, it's mostly foam. The pink foam layered, hot glued together. You can kind of see a progression of what that foam looks like. So it's foam, and then you get to the plaster cloth, sculpt mold on top of that. This particular scene has kind of a rock wall there, so that's the Woodland Scenics plaster. And then the lower right, you can see kind of what a mostly finished bit of scenery looks like. I've also been experimenting with the difference between using plywood as a substrate and foam. There's a spot later where I'll show you where I'm using that. But pretty typical scenery techniques. So I really had some design priorities for this room. For the entry, I really didn't want any kind of duck or crawl under. Now, I'm not getting any younger, and so those are kind of hard to navigate. I wanted wide aisles, and you can kind of see in this picture that they're fairly wide. I think at the narrowest it might be about 3 feet here, with some areas that are wider. People can get by each other. Didn't want a real kind of closed in feeling. Also options for continuous running. So if I've got some spare time, I'll typically, set up some trains, run trains, want to, just kind of do model rail fanning essentially. And having an option for continuous running on both decks was important. Then let's look at logical design. There are 3 layers. And so the upper deck contains Leicester, Borup Loop area, and Stampede. Staging, where Seattle, Tacoma, and Pasco are represented, are on that lower deck. And there's kind of hidden track down there. So talk about some of the challenges with that. But so this is the kind of the design schematic. On the main deck, you have Auburn with the yard that's to be built, and then that goes down in the visible section to Meeker Junction, and there'll be a little branch off to McMillan. That'll give me at least the opportunity for some level of switching. Perhaps there's a local from Auburn that goes out there. So layout, I really came down to 2 options for the layout design here. I used CAD Rail to design this, and I got to this design and probably stared at it for about 6 months. And there was just something I didn't like about it. I mean, the pro was it got more railroad in the room. It was a longer run, but it had too many monotonous scenes to me. The railroad was always within a few inches of the edge of the benchwork, and yes, you would have a longer run, but it's just kind of all the same, and that just didn't sit right with me. And kind of the way the entry was, and the fact that I've got a helix here, I did have to make one interesting design concession. If you're kind of a keen observer, you'd note that the Auburn yard is actually mirrored. So off to the right here on the main level is north, and the prototype, the yard would be on the other side. But there's design concessions we have to make, right? And this design created pinch points in the aisle. These ended up being like 21.5 inches. I've only got 11 feet, 11.5 feet to work with. So really didn't want that. So came up with a different idea. It's like, well, let's get rid of the one aisle and make just a single aisle design. This opened up the aisles, or the aisle at this point, and it created more variety in the scenes. Yes, there were some narrow scenes, but there were also some wide scenes, like down here on the main level, where you're going to see the bridge south of Auburn. It's a deeper scene, gives you some more variation. And then an artifact of this also is it creates this really deep scene for Borup Loop, and I'll show you a picture of that as well as we walk around the layout. One of the things that this did create, though, is I have to have an access hatch here in this Borup Loop area, and the idea is to just scenic it so you don't see it from the aisle unless you're really tall. So after time, I opted for this single aisle design. Okay, well, let's follow a train around the layout. We're going to start here in a staging yard on the lower level. This front staging yard represents Seattle and Tacoma, and I already know I don't have enough staging tracks, but that's a challenge. I'll have to solve it another time. Leaving Tacoma, we climb out of staging to get to the main level. And this is about a 3% climb, but it's mostly straight, and it seems like most of the equipment that I have navigates it just fine. So we emerge here at Meeker Junction, and the intent is to have a overpass kind of shield the entrance from staging. This is one area that I have used the foam sheets as kind of the substrate. Um, this has been it's great for flat areas. Whenever you want to do some kind of slight transition in the grade, I found the foam to be harder to work with, and I would just opt for using high quality plywood at that point. It's also in this area that this branch will head off. This shelf goes. It's about a foot wide and another 10 feet long to the left there. And moving on, this is the representation of the White River Bridge south of Auburn. In in the 80s, my dad lived within walking distance of this bridge down there, and we went over there lots to watch trains. So that's probably where my affinity for Cascade Green came from. This is the south end of the yard, and you can get a kind of a preview of what control panels and building look like. Um, this is right in front. This is the south end of the yard, so you got the crossovers here. So this is our train going through the yard, and I use air quotes as yard right now because it's a lot of plywood. When you get a sense of that, and then we're going to take the Y here at Auburn and head east. Then we head up the helix. So takes 5 turns to get from the main level, and the main level is where you can see the NCE controllers there, up to the upper deck. And once we merge in the upper deck, we're just kind of rolling along, nearing Leicester. This track on the left here is fictional. I always think maybe there was a an interchange that the Milwaukee punched through to Leicester. This allows me to do continuous running. It would also be a good excuse to buy some Milwaukee motive power too. So we'll see if that comes to pass. These are the bridge crossing the Green River on the west side of Leicester. Here, this narrow shelf represents the beginning of double track going into Leicester. It's kind of become the de facto yard right now because there isn't any other yard facility that tends to collect a bunch of trains right now. Here, this is going to be the High Bridge or the Green River. This section that's painted black right now is really a placeholder for that bridge. The intention is to have a little shelf here and then build that bridge. I have the micro engineering kits. They just need to be built. So this is the Borup Loop scene. This creates a really deep scene. I kind of like it because it's kind of one area in the layout where you can kind of see your train stretch out. The intention here is to um, build a overcast scene. This is actually kind of dark. I had to play around with the exposure on the camera a lot to get a picture that was even this bright. But the intention is to have a cloud layer and then depict a real overcast, dark Pacific Northwest day, which we're prone to have. So, and there is this access hatch here, and the intention is just to make a little bit of scenery to kind of cover it up and so you don't see it, but you can get back in there to work on it. So this is us winding our way, just meeting a westbound. Um, So I've got a mix of equipment, BN and some NP. I'm definitely looking to mix in the other pre-merger roads as well. Here we're at the end of the double track at West Stampede. Got the kit to build the NP station here, and you can see some of the scenery technique as far as layers of foam and how that's working. Here we're on the east side, tunnel number 4. Just emerging there on one of the pieces of more or less finished scenery. So here we're crossing what I call a knot under. I didn't want to duck under, but to get in and out of the room, I thought, nodding down slightly was um, was appropriate. So this is what you see when you enter the room. So it's a bit of kind of a striking scene with the scenery on both sides, and then real thin supported section in the middle there. And we're about to enter the west portal of the tunnel, and so this is a shot that direction um, of of the tunnel and the snow shed in front of it. And I think it's a pretty good representation of the powerhouse that was there. From there, we wind down the helix. The inside track of the helix takes you all the way down to staging. 8.5 turns to get down there, and then you end up back down on the staging level and on the rear staging yard, which represents the east, all points east, essentially. So just a few design challenges that worked through on this. Hidden track work with the staging level. Um, the track work's hidden. The challenge here was to make sure that I could service turnouts and switch machines, because down on this level, all the turnouts are controlled by tortoise machines and then those control panels. But anything that's visible will be hand throws. So I've really used kind of three different ways of dealing with this. I've got some magnets that hold lift out sections in place. I've got some hinges, so I have pivoting sections, and then modular power. So if you take a section out, you can unplug it. I initially thought that these sections might move around a lot, as far as the wood and the material, and make aligning the rails difficult. But they've been in for a year, so they've been through an entire set of seasons, and they've been very stable. And I think that's because I used some project plywood that I had laying around. It's probably been about a decade, so it's already gone through any of the warping and shrinking that it's gonna have. So this is a close-up, one of the magnets. They're normally sunk into the bench work, and then the section that comes down snaps into place on top of it. Uh, Another um, area where I've got some hinges, um, uh, to access this track work and services. I wanted to be able to get in there. So this just simply lifts up. At some point, I need to put some kind of uh, contact here. When it loses contact, that it disables the track power on either side. But right now, you just have to remember that it's up if you're running something. I mentioned modular power. I'm using these Molex connectors to allow you to quickly disconnect a lift out section. Like in this example, this section lifts out on the lower picture to get at the switch machines and turnouts that are below. And there's our train that we watched go around. Um, and partly, partially, I built these lift out sections because I haven't installed all the switch machines yet down on this end. So I actually needed these um, to still work on this end of the staging yard. Oh. So I mentioned that entryway, and so I'd originally found this picture online, a blog from the inspiration was an entry from the CP Rail in Manitoba and Minnesota. So I saw that and I'm like, oh, that's a brilliant idea to have, uh, just something that you nod under to get into the room. Didn't really want the swing bridge. It seemed like a lot of engineering to put together, um, but I incorporated this. So this got to my design requirement of not having a duck under. So if you kind of back up and look back towards the entry of the room, you can see the kind of height of it. For most people, it's something to nod under. My son's between 6'4" and 6'5". He disagrees that it's a nod under, but um, it works for most. But you can see kind of left to right, that's our area coming into Leicester, the tunnel number 4, and then to the extreme right, you have West Stampede. Control panels. So I wanted these to be easily accessible for troubleshooting. And by trade, being a IT guy, I was like, hey, I can wire up switch machines with Cat5 networking cable. They're real modular. In that case, if I ever need to replace a switch machine, I can just plug and unplug it from the control panel. And these are hinged with Velcro tabs on them right here. So if I need to get at them, just open them up and work on whatever needs to. So what am I working on next? Uh, Definitely the Auburn yard, collecting all the micro engineering ladder track turnouts. Um, at this point. The DCC, like I mentioned, I use NCE, and it's I haven't really broken the layout into power districts, and as I'm adding more power, that's going to become an issue. Scenery, always a thing. Currently, less than 5% of that is complete. Um, when what it's one of those things that when I get into scenery, I do some and then move on to other projects. And I still need to work out what the operating scheme is. I kind of designed it so that I could have other operators. Not sure how many there would be. Really not sure what my car forwarding is going to look like. I've got limited switching, so it's probably a lot of block swaps in the Auburn yard. But yeah, still trying to figure those things out. And with that, want to open it up for Q&A.
Thank you, Jame. That was a really nice presentation. I do see one question in the chat that Jake Sweeney asked, and that was what the typical dimension of a lift out section is.
They're relatively small. The biggest one I have, I think, is about 24 by 30 inches, and they're typically just over areas where there's a bunch of turnouts underneath.
Okay. I was wondering about that. So you've still got a lot of track to lay outside of the ladders or between the ladders, rather, in the yard. Or will you have to do that all in that tight headroom space, or will you open that up just to lay the track?
Well, I think I did myself one favor by laying all of the staging yard before building the main deck on top of it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Didn't realize that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the delays in getting the main deck put together. I have the sections so that I can get in and maintain the existing track work.
Also had a question. You mentioned that the Auburn yard is mirrored. Could you say a little more about that?
Yeah, so what I ended up realizing was to fit the design into the room where the door was and having the helix, it was just most efficient to have the yard on that side of the room. And the yard is mirrored in the fact that it's a mirror image of where the Auburn yard should be. So if you were coming up from the north, the yard would be on the right hand side, and then you would head off to Stampede off to the right because that's east. Um, East is to the right of north as you go forward. So I did flip the yard around, so it's in the right place. It's just on the wrong side of the tracks.
Okay. So the ladder actually goes when you're heading north, goes to the left, and then the eastbound track comes off the west side of the yard or the far side of the yard where the Y is there,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions?
I have a simple one. What did you end up with on your pinch distance in the new version of your layout? You know?
Uh, the narrowest part of the aisles are about 3 feet.
Okay.
So it
Yeah,
just
that's manageable.
yeah, it's manageable. People can get by. And then at the end of the room, there's actually a fairly good size open area that's probably 5 or 6 feet. And it's been useful when, especially when I'm showing the layout to friends, family, that sort of thing, to actually have a couple people, be able to stand and talk. Yeah,
Do you have any feeling for how many people you think could operate in that room at the same time with you in your space? Are you going for 4 people or?
Yeah, if I was gonna guess, it'd probably be 4 or 5, somewhere around there.
Jake Sweeney asked about the grade on the Helix.
Yeah, it's a little stout. The radius of it is somewhere in the high 20s. It's probably 2.5%.
And that's 2.5% without any curve compensation, just the basic grade, right? Yeah. So it probably effectively runs pushing 4% with the curve, maybe.
It's probably about there, yeah.
And so but you'll always have multiple units pulling trains, so shouldn't be a problem for you.
No, it shouldn't be. Yeah. Locomotives are pretty strong, so
Hey, Jamie, this is one of the best presentations I've ever seen, and I'm thinking, um, would you consider making an article about this for the Layout Design Journal? Are you a member of that?
I'm not. Yeah, if you want to forward me some information on that, I'll take a look at it.
Okay, great. Yeah, I did that a few years ago, and it was a good project to do.
Okay, yeah. No, this was a good opportunity to actually force me to kind of think through the various aspects of the layout because I hadn't before. So it's a good exercise. Appreciate the
Good.
opportunity.
And as a comment, I don't think I've ever seen magnets used to hold down a lift out section. That's quite ingenious.
Well, I had seen a number of articles and videos. I don't know if anybody watches the What's Neat this week. Ken Patterson. He was big into doing modules that are stuck together with magnets.
Hmm.
I thought, well, why couldn't you use a magnet to hold a lift out section in place? Versus having any other pins or anything else. Because once you get that set, that's where it's going to be. So I don't know. They've been in place for a year, and I haven't had derailments yet. So stay tuned. We'll see. Because I'm not using rail joiners that connect those two rails. I may be forced to someday.
So have you thought about some of the industries you might put up that branch to be able to maybe have a crew work a local out and back?
Yeah, and that's something I was kind of doing some research on, is to see what was down there at the time. Because I know today they still it's a short line, and they run a couple, maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, down to a couple industries. But yeah, it's a research project.
Always good to have a few of those projects in your back pocket,
Oh, those are endless.
and well, as you build stuff like this, then all of a sudden you see these opportunities that, at least in my small brain, I missed when I was drawing the track plan, and then later you can add just a lot of fun things into it.
Yeah. Yeah, there used to be a cement plant or something along the big cement tower or something on the east side of the Auburn yard, and I thought that would be something interesting to put in the corner of the yard because it's kind of a dead space.
Place to bring a lot of covered hoppers in.
Yeah, well, and yeah, and the train we followed was a bunch of had some of those in there, so yeah, that'd be good.
They also had a
James?
borrow pit over there east of the Auburn yard that you could insert or just send a track behind buildings and not necessarily show the digging, but it would be a good source for ballast cars and so on.
You
Did you say that
probably said all
layout
these
is one
things.
power district now?
Yeah, at this point, yeah, it's one power district.
I thought I noticed some wiser reversing sections. How do you deal with those?
With the little reversing section circuit boards, ones that detect the polarity and switch it around, but it's one big power district at this point.
So you don't have reversing section modules or electronics?
Yeah, I do. I have the reverse section. There's a couple of them.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, there's a couple of them in place.
And they don't give problems with just one power district?
Not at this point.
Well, that's great.
My luck
Good
may
news.
As one brace of locomotives fits entirely on the track of the Y.
Yeah, that's the constraint. There's two of them right now. There's one as you get to the upper deck, and then another one is the first about 2 turns of the helix coming out of the yard. But yeah, that's the limitation on train length is the length of the reversing section on the upper deck.
I think you said you don't have enough staging yards. Do you have any idea for adding that?
At this point, not quite. It may turn into another level further down.
Do you have a plan of how you would add your power districts, logically, just where they might be and how many you might use?
Yeah, I think initially I would probably make each level a district, and then possibly also just within the yard, because the north end of the yard will be engine facility as well. So you're typically going to have a lot of power draw there. So, but at least what I've done is, so the upper deck goes up in a single set of feeds, so it should be relatively straightforward to get the additional boosters and get the and isolate it electrically, not having to really tease out a bunch of commingled track work. It's here's a level, so should be pretty straightforward.
I think as you start operations and having multiple people operating on the layout at once, you'll really quickly figure out where you want those. Like the yard, somebody's always running over a switch the wrong way in a yard and shorting. So that would be separate from the main line so that whoever's running on the main line wouldn't be slammed to a stop.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and then when you start operating, then yeah, that's those become considerations. But when it's just me dinking around, in the train room.
Have you had any layout helpers, or is it just you?
Just me at this point.
Made really nice progress for just you. So good
Oh,
job. Now, I like the idea of having some completed scenery, while you're still fleshing out some of the other parts of the layout.
yeah, that really having at least a little bit of completed scenery, one, when we show the layout to people, they can kind of visualize what will eventually be. But it is also a bit of a motivation to say, okay, it is possible to have this little section look like I want it to. So
What were the specs on things like rail size, minimum radius, turnout minimum, those kind of things?
sure.
Great.
Yeah, so I salvaged all my code 100 track from the first layout. So anything that's hidden is code 100. And then anything that's visible is 83. Try to stick with number 6 turnouts, but with the ladder track system in the yard, those are fives. And I've got some fives in various areas where I needed that curve all the way through the frog. And then let's see, that was that. Oh, and minimum radius. I try to stick in the upper 20s. I've had to make a couple of concessions. One of the legs of the Auburn Y is we're going to call it pretty tight to get it in there. But typically, I'm operating. The biggest thing I'm operating are the 6-axle diesels. I don't have much passenger equipment, and so it wasn't as much of a consideration for that. So
And the minimum grade or the maximum grade?
there's areas that are like pulling out of staging is 3%. The helix is probably 2.5, but then Lee, to your point, it's probably 4% effective. Normally have multiple units on a train, and because of the constraints of the reversing sections, I can operate decent train lengths, but I'm not pulling 25 feet of cars.
To the staging question, I was looking at your helix thinking, you could stage a train or two in there um, during an op session potentially.
I have considered that using that inner track of the helix as additional points east staging. You wouldn't have to go all the way down to the staging yard to tie something up. It would be I guess they'd call that linear staging. No,
Yeah. Do you have crossovers in the helix that you could use to pass trains if you had one that you wanted to get around a stage train?
no, not at this point. It's all just straight track.
That's the kind of thing I would have done and then spent a bunch of effort fiddling in between the layers and getting turnouts built in there. But they could be worthwhile. One thing
Yeah,
I learned is um, you got to be really careful with the couplers, in the helix.
yeah. There's some pretty tight clearances in there. It does need some work. So
But you can tweak it with the way you've got it built with those all threads. You can keep it dialed in where it should be on grade and without undue undulations or any problems with the track work that would cause couplers to come undone and lead to that sickening sound of a cut of cars rolling down a helix at 100 miles an hour.
yeah, they get going. That's it. Yeah, no, it is with all the all threads. So I can make tweaks and adjustments. I've contemplated whether to box that in or cover it up, but it's funny because the non-model railroaders that come over and take a look at it, they're more interested in looking at the helix than anything else. So I'm just going to leave it open.
I think that's a good idea. It is really interesting to other people, and then it's helpful to you as the owner to have it accessible. I find I don't know how model railroads figure this out, but if you have any place that you can't get to, that's where they'll create the problem for you, just to spite you. I think I don't know why.
Are you gonna stay with the foam board for roadbed and for main frame?
Well, I have all the main lines in right now, so I don't need to use any more foam for like a substrate for track work. But I still have a lot for scenery. Um, uh,
I just noticed the one section there.
Yeah, yeah. I was playing around with it, and the only problem is when you're using the foam, I had a really hard time making a smooth gradient when I needed to go up just a little bit versus where, you know, you have a piece of plywood um as the road bed, you can make those subtle adjustments. But as soon as you start carving foam, you know, chunks come off, and it's just really hard to make a smooth transition.
In civil engineering, they call those the vertical curves.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
And on my first helix, I didn't pay attention to that, and it was the no end of problems there. I finally fixed it, but on my second helix, I calculated the vertical curve, and it paid off.
Yeah.
The pink foam is hard to get into that curve geometry.
Yeah, it's great if you're modeling something that's just flat land. But I had just a little bit of variation between the height of where the Auburn Yard is and where Meeker Junction is, and I had to do a bit of a transition on the foam, and it was tough. So
It looks like you've got a good solution and a smooth running layout now. Is it running like you hoped it would?
well, it was running smooth until I got my first set of the scale trains, the 6-axle locomotives, and those found every imperfection vertically in the track work. I thought the the wheel sets were out of gauge was my first inclination, but then realized that I had been building track work for 4-axle locomotives that'll go over anything. Um, so yeah, I'm still finding and resolving issues there.
That's why the prototypes had track crews, right?
There was something real to not sending a big 6-axle locomotive down a branch line, right?
Well, if there are no more questions, we'd like to extend a great thanks to you, Jamie, for making this presentation. It's really interesting, and I think everybody really enjoyed it. And it's great to see layouts in progress. So thank you so much for putting it together. And I echo one of the comments that this is one of the best layout tours we've had.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
John's comment, yeah. So thank you.